And in this episode of WQA Radio, our weekly podcast, we are going to be talking about instructor-led training at the Water Quality Association. We've got two of our instructors. We've got Paul Friot and Cliff Fasnacht. And gentlemen, I'm going to have you introduce yourselves and tell us about your certifications and training and all of that good stuff, just to get that clear so I don't mess it up, okay? So Cliff, why don't you start?
Thank you, Wes. My name is Clifford Fasnacht. I am a Master Water Specialist with WQA. I'm also in the state of California certified or licensed as a general engineering contractor, a groundwater professional, water treatment contractor, and plumber, and probably 2 or 3 other classifications that I seem to forget from time to time.
Well, I'll certainly excuse you for that. Paul, how about you?
Good morning, Wes. Thanks for having us on this morning. My certifications are through the Water Quality Association, coincidentally. And I'm a Master Water Specialist, certified installer, certified water representative, and certified service tech.
Excellent. Well, great to have you both on the program. We're talking about the instructor-led sessions. You guys are the instructors. We've had some sessions for the last couple of years, and they have been growing in interest and attendees. I'd like to, for those who don't really understand it yet or haven't, maybe they've heard about it, but they're still curious and they don't know too much. Give me a sense of, Paul, what happens during these live instructor-led training sessions?
Well, it varies to some extent depending upon the course that a student's taking, but fundamentally, I would say for the CWS classes, we are giving the students a foundation of knowledge upon which to build. In other words, they're not going to finish these classes and know, quote unquote, everything there is to know about water quality. In fact, I would say none of us are in that category, but it gives them a basis, some basic knowledge. It gives them a way to approach problem solving. And we also get involved with the ethics as well as looking at certified systems. If they need to deal with primary contaminants, what do they need to look for as far as having certified systems? So it's a variety of aspects.
And Cliff, these are online sessions. You're the instructor, and you've got these students who are all online in a Zoom session, I think, right?
Correct.
So, yeah, tell me what it's like.
Okay, as Paul described, our goal here is to bring the students to a level of an analogy that I like to use of bringing our students from a level of a cook to a chef, and what that really means. And I'd like to talk about that maybe a little bit in depth a little bit later in the podcast. But basically, we like to equip the students with the tools, knowledge that they can take out in the field when they're installing these devices to be able to do much more professional job, much faster job, much more efficient job that provides the owners, management, their companies, a better view in the customer's eyes.
And Paul, in the past, before these instructor-led training sessions began, you had to do it on your own. You were basically, in the old days, you were reading books, and then we got the coursework online, and you were going through the various modules. But that didn't always work all that well, right? I mean, that's why we went to this new format.
I think that from some of the feedback we've received from students, that they find it helpful that there's a certain level of structure. Number one, they know each week there's a 1-hour class and it's at a certain time. And some of them have expressed the value that having an instructor there, having that interaction, and at the end of each class, we are happy to stick around and answer any questions students have. And in fact, some students have said to us that they find that's the most interesting part of the whole process is the discussions we have at the end of class.
Yeah, and Cliff, have you felt a similar a reaction?
Yeah, I think Paul's pretty right on there with that. There's always, at the end of the class, there's always that question and answer period that we provide to students to where they can ask questions that, even if it didn't relate to that particular episode or that particular class, that they can go back, they can relate some of their field experiences, some of the questions, some of the things that they have encountered in their day-to-day activities.
So let's talk about the value of the courses. I've kind of alluded to it. Again, you were on your own in the past, and now you've got a group, a cohort of sorts you can see the others kind of along with you. There's a kind of an esprit de corps, I would imagine. Everybody's doing this. You're still on your own, obviously. You still have to learn the material, but you're doing it with others, and you're doing it with an instructor. So I can imagine there's quite a bit of motivation that is part of this. Would you say so, Paul?
Oh, I think so. And we are, like any process, we are learning as we go through this each time and refining it to try and improve it for the students so that it's more engaging and more enjoyable for them, and getting them more involved in the process, having more interaction. And they seem to appreciate that, I think.
Yeah. Anything to add to that, Cliff?
I think Paul did a really nice job of that. It's like most things, it's a ever evolving process where we sit back and we will review the classes and what seemed to work well, what didn't work well. So we make changes to keep them current, fresh, and relevant to the current practices and current technologies.
So, Cliff, the goal here is to prepare the student for taking the exam, right?
Mm-hmm.
To get the certification.
That's only one small portion of it. The bigger portion of it, and this may be a good place to fall back to my little saying earlier. The goal here, what I like to say is we like to elevate these students from being a basic cook to a chef, and the way I illustrate this is a cook is able to take a written recipe and follow it step by step, and if he's missing an ingredient or there's something wrong, he's stuck. He doesn't understand how to move beyond that ingredient list and struggles. Whereas a chef can walk into a pantry full of ingredients and create whatever meal he feels he needs to out of that. And so we liken that to our industry, where a installer will go out to a job and perhaps it's not exactly as was laid out on the work order. Hopefully by the end of the class, he has gained those tools and those knowledges to be able to look at a situation and be able to adapt, overcome, to facilitate the correct installation in a manner that is efficient and professional looking and works the way the customer intended for it to work.
Well, that sounds very encouraging, and I understand the exam is ultimately something that has to be taken in order to get the certification. But your vision for the higher purpose is extremely well stated. And Paul, anything to add to that?
No, I mean, Cliff did a good job. I mean, that is our ultimate goal, is to help bring the students along and elevate their knowledge. And also, the whole concept to me elevates the industry. Makes us all more professional as individuals become certified. So it's a big plus in that regard too.
Let's switch gears for a little bit. Talk about the employer who has these various installers and techs and whatnot who need the training and ultimately the certification. What's in it for the employer?
So kind of, if I may, Wes, kind of along that same line as my earlier comments there, if your employees are now chefs, your concern over their ability to do the professional installation correctly, properly, meeting all of the standards, codes, and so on and so forth, is now significantly improved. And so now with a installer that has those tools, has that knowledge, from an employer standpoint, you're going to be more productive. Your company is going to have a better image to the customer, and the industry is going to have a much better image.
So, Paul, it's almost like, why wouldn't you want your employees to go through this training?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, part of what we are trying to instill is to have a certain approach to problem solving. For example, whether it's what Cliff's talking about with, okay, what's plan B? If you get to the house and it isn't what you expected, but also if you're analyzing either test results or you are in a customer's kitchen discussing symptoms that they're experiencing, what's a sort of a logical way to go after the goal of satisfying the customer? And part of that involves understanding, what are the customer's goals? What do they want to achieve? Don't assume that you know what they want, because sometimes it's not intuitive. And thinking comprehensively rather than piecemeal. Step back and say, what's everything with which we're confronted? How does that affect what I might say about this issue if it were all by itself, because you're not operating in a vacuum? And I think that's beneficial to employers, because they hopefully end up with employees who are more effective and require less guidance and hand-holding in the long run.
Right. And to go back to that other analogy of the chef and the cook, or the person who shows up and things aren't quite what you expected, the person who has just the kind of that base level of knowledge and has no further understanding isn't going to be able to adapt to the situation and to flex and come up with a creative solution.
And from an employer standpoint, now that installer is going to be struggling on the job site, maybe having to make multiple calls back to somebody in the office for help. And if the customer happens to be standing right there watching, which happens numerous times, because the customer's got a vested interest, they're interested in what you're doing, the whole process, that doesn't give a very good impression of the installer's ability, knowledge, and poses questions to the customer that may ultimately end up having to be answered somewhere down the line. Whereas if your installer has that good understanding, good knowledge, they can present themselves in a much more professional and efficient and effective manner.
Right. Well, just to get back to some of the particulars of the classes, are we talking an hour session, and or how many weeks, and is there homework? I wanted to ask that question as well.
Now, of course, there's no homework. No. Yeah, there's homework for pretty much every class.
So each class is about an hour long, plus or minus a little bit. Sometimes we run over a little bit because both Paul and I tend to like to talk sometimes. But yeah, and there is homework. Some of it generally shouldn't take the student much more than about a half hour, maybe at the most, for a week for the session. And the class runs now 18 weeks from start to finish.
Depending on the course, right? Some of them are maybe 15 weeks on the class, but and with the homework, if a student, so each time a student does a homework assignment, they submit it for approval. And generally we either approve it or we send it back saying more information required. So they get a second shot at it, or a third shot, whatever it takes. And when we do that, we write a note to the student indicating what the reason was that it wasn't accepted. So it's a learning process for them in that regard also.
And I think both Paul and I do a pretty good job of working with the student on those problem questions, and sometimes to the extent where we will even reach out personally to them and make sure that they understand beyond just getting the question right. We want them to understand the logistics behind it, the background behind it, so that they don't just answer the questions and then move on.
Well, thank you both for doing this. This is great to give us your perspective on the instructor-led training sessions for WQA certification. And I want to bring in Tanya Lubner, PhD and Director of Training and Professional Certification at WQA. Tanya, how do people find out more about the program and get signed up and everything that you can tell us about how to do that?
Best place to start is our professional certification page on the WQA website. You will find information about what the certifications are, and reading through that, you can see what best fits with your job role and your goals. And from there, if you're ready to sign up, you will get links to be able to purchase the courses. We're doing bundles this starting January of 24, which means that you pay once and you get everything you need in order to go on through the classes and to certification. So for installers, for example, you are getting both access to the class and the certification exam once you have completed all of the class requirements.
Now, if there is an employer with more than one person that he or she wants certified, can more than one person at a company take the instructor-led training?
Oh, absolutely. We've had companies that will sign up as many as 7 people at the same time, and they will all sit in the conference room during the class, and they'll even have discussions afterwards about what they saw in class. The only caveat there is that everybody has to do their own homework. It's okay to do it as a group, and the instructors will see when somebody's been doing it as a group because everybody's got the same answer. But again, as Cliff and Paul both pointed out, the goal is to make sure that the students understand the underlying concepts so that they're able to then apply them in the field. And I would say that the instructors at this point have gotten pretty good at figuring out whether or not somebody understands those underlying concepts.
Great. All right. Well, it certainly seems like a worthy project, and hope that as you listen to this and understand this better, that your employees can take advantage of this tremendous program that the Water Quality Association has to offer. So, Tanya, thank you. Cliff and Paul, thank you very much for joining us. And if you're interested in more information, go to wqa.org/profcert, and you can find the information there. All right. Thanks so much.
Thank you, Wes.
Thanks, Russ.
Thank you, Wes.